All right, prep time management, advanced prep time management. Every year when I start the camp, I make a list of fundamental skills that I want to make sure that we teach. Prep time management is on that list, and a lot of times when we do our anonymous Q&A, there are questions asked about prep time. A lot of times before debates, points of emphasis for students involve prep time management. An interesting thing to kind of think about as we begin is that prep time is not an inherent or necessary part of debate. Debate existed before there was prep time. And I don't know if this story is true, and I tried to look it up and figure out where I heard it from. But I've heard a story that the origin of prep time was Lawrence Tribe. And so before Lawrence Tribe, who coached Neil Katyal for the Hamden case, we talked to Neil Katyal the other day, he was a very successful debater at Harvard, and then he coached at Harvard. And the story that I heard, and I don't know if this is true, but it's an awesome story if it is true, is that before prep time was a thing, it was just expected that teams would take a reasonable amount of time and then get up and give their speech, and they wouldn't delay. But Tribe coached his teams to delay for a really long time, such that it was delaying tournaments and it was really obnoxious. Sometimes they would leave and go to the library and then come back before their speech. And so they had to make prep time and a limited amount of prep time a rule. And that probably is not true, but I will just pretend that it is true because I think it was an awesome story. Ever since prep time has been created, it's been something that students struggled with. You only have a very limited amount of time, and debate is really hard, and you wish that you had more prep time. And it is, a lot of times it's only 8 minutes, sometimes you get as many as 10. In some districts it's still only like 5 minutes. If you've been in Kansas, I think it's still only 5 minutes, sometimes at NFLs, I think. And so I think a lot of you have a general idea of what you're supposed to be doing, but I'm going to try to help you kind of learn a little bit more advanced approach to prep time. And then I'm going to talk about different ways to use prep time, using prep time in atypical ways that I think are actually better for managing your prep time. So one of the best debate coaches and lab leaders of his era was named David Cheshire. He was a professor at Georgia State. He taught at Dartmouth for a really long time during the summer. And he has an article in 2001 about prep time, and if you search for Cheshire prep time, you can find it. But in it he said, quote, "The basic rules of prep time management are well known and obvious to anyone who thinks about the topic for even a few minutes. Save prep time for the last speeches to the extent possible. Devise a system to collaborate efficiently with your partner. Do as much preparing before the round as possible. Work to stay organized during the debate, both with respect to your flow sheet and your evidence." And I agree with that. But he went on to say that that basic advice that we all kind of understand intuitively can be really difficult to implement. And he concluded that the most important way to reduce prep time use at tournaments is to spend more time preparing before they begin. And that is kind of my primary message. So the goal of this lecture is to help you all use prep time better in debate, so in-round prep time. And so I'm going to begin by discussing 3 major principles of prep time use, and then I'm going to discuss examples of how to use prep time differently, talking about the different slots in debates when prep time could be used. So part 1 is major principles. And the first major principle is that most in-round prep time issues are due to shortcomings in out-of-round preparation. So most in-round prep time issues are due to shortcomings in out-of-round preparation. Subpoint A is that as a general rule, or as a general principle, as a goal, anything that you could do before the tournament, you should do before the tournament. There's very little time during debates to think and to prepare. And so if you're having prep time problems, if there are many things that need preparing and you don't have enough time to prepare them during a debate, it's probably because your pre-tournament preparation was inadequate. Well-organized teams that have well-prepared files and that have well-designed strategy maps and well-maintained argument inventories tend to have less difficulty managing their in-round prep time because, for obvious reasons, they're well-organized and well-prepared. And we'll talk more about how to become a well-organized team. But the reason that I mention this first is that you can't fix problems that happened before the tournament during the round. There is no way to life hack prep time to such an extent that it makes up for your failings before you even made it to the tournament. Subpoint B is that even at a tournament, anything that can be done before the round starts should be done before the round starts. So when we talk about prep time at a tournament, and even the name of this lecture, I think what most of you, what came to mind is the 8 minutes that you get during the debate. But prep time really begins, your in-round prep time, as soon as the pairing is announced. And so there is a significant amount of prep time, even at tournaments with condensed schedules, before the 1AC begins. You usually get at least 10 minutes of preparation time between the time that the pairing comes out and the time that the debate begins. And if you've done a good job before the tournament of getting yourself organized and putting yourself in a position to be well prepared, then that pre-round preparation time can be just as valuable as your during or in-round preparation time. And so it's very important to use that time maximally to kind of steal extra prep time during the debate. There are a few specific examples that I can provide, and we can talk about these in more detail in the Q&A after this is complete. But the app should make a customized 2AC document that includes their responses to things that this negative team has said in the past, this negative school has said in the past, or any arguments that the affirmative has reason to believe the negative might say in this debate. If you do this well, you have a limited, very cleanly organized 2AC document. You can make some tweaks and changes to customize your 2AC document to the specific team that you're debating. And then during prep time, during the debate, it's very easy. You just kind of move stuff over or you delete the things that they didn't read. And if you've done it right, you don't have to open up any more files and things are very streamlined. And you can spend your prep time doing more advanced things than just kind of compiling responses to what they have said. The negative should put together their strategy, and that should be decided before the tournament so that the pre-round decisions are not like, we're debating the right to education affirmative. What in the world might we say? Let us consider all of the different options at our disposal. And by the time you've thought through all of that, you've wasted all of your pre-round prep time. So this hinges on knowing what you're going to say, but then you put that document together. You start then adding value to your 1NC document by doing some AF-specific preparation. You look through the 1AC cards, you kind of add some customized analytical arguments. You start preparing your general cross-ex materials to be more specifically applicable to the team that you're debating, the affirmative that you're debating. You work on preparing your important blocks for the negative block and even for the 2NR. You start to think about what this debate will come down to. You start even scripting some important language that might be usable in the 2NR to make important comparisons. And then you can also, as you do that, maybe identify a place where, if time became available, this is the thing that you would do to add value. So you would read this. Maybe before the tournament they hadn't read a particular solvency card in their 1AC. They had added it at this tournament. So the first time you're seeing it is in this disclosure, or looking at the wiki. So if time is available, I'm going to go back and I'm going to read that solvency article. I'm going to see if there's something in there. I'm going to get a sense of that one. But that helps you then decide what to do with your prep time during the debate. And the details, obviously, of all of this depend kind of on what your arguments are, what your strategy is. But things that might be helpful, recutting 1AC evidence to support negative arguments or a counterplan or whatever, scripting and working really hard on disad turns the case or K turns the case if you're doing a critique, outlining a specific list of K links from 1AC evidence. A lot of that you could do before the tournament, but you can, if you've generally done a good job of preparing, you can add a lot of value right before the debate. Major principle number 2. In order to maximize your in-round prep time, you must prepare to prepare. In order to maximize your in-round prep time, you must prepare to prepare or prepare to prep. Sub 1A in this section is that prep time has to be practiced, just like anything else. And a lot of students, I don't think, practice prep time and think that it is weird when I tell them that they must practice prep time. You obviously practice all other parts of the debate, and that helps you get better. Practicing prepping allows you to design or think about a workflow, kind of a system that you're going to use during the debate to manage your prep time, to use it. It allows you then to practice that workflow that you have developed. It allows you to evaluate how that is going. What are the pitfalls of this? What is working? What is not? And then it allows you to redesign that process or that workflow so that it can be better when you go to a tournament. Some things that you could think about. You could try to get better at flowing. Sometimes flowing and penmanship or handwriting are serious impediments to effective prep time usage. If you're a student who self-identifies as, I can't read anything I've written, or I can't read anything my partner's written, or I write really long words, I don't know shorthand, you can practice shorthand. You can practice listening. One of the drills that I've suggested, I think that I have a 3NR article about this, is to listen to things at higher than normal speeds. So listen to podcasts at 2x or 2.5x, listen to YouTube lectures at 2.5x or 3x. If you get better at flowing, which is both listening and writing, those are the two facets of flowing, that can help you make your prep time management better. You can get better at using your computer. Another thing that I really find irritating is when debate students in the year 2017 self-identify as bad at computers, or my computer doesn't work, or I don't know how to use computers, and that kind of thing. Because using your computer is part of being a good debater. So for some students, you need to learn how to type faster and more accurately. For other students, you need to learn how to move documents around, how to structure your screen, how to organize your file system so that things are accessible, you know where they are. And for all students, you just need to become a wizard at using verbatim. Aaron Hardy developed this unbelievable tool that you have no idea how blessed you are to have, that has so many amazing features that make your debating better. Stuff like the auto block insertion, stuff like standardizing highlighting, stuff like the amazing stats tool that allows you to estimate based on your words per minute how long something will take, and many, many more things. And there's excellent documentation about that online. If you're bad at using verbatim, get better at it. That will make your prep time management better. And finally, you can simulate scarce prep time. I would most commonly encourage you to practice with very little prep time, or no prep time, especially once you're more familiar with your files. so that when you're in a round, all the prep time that is available seems like a gift, like an amazing blessing, as opposed to a limited amount of time, because at home you have an infinite amount of time, or a relatively infinite amount of time. Obviously, no amount of time is truly infinite. Subpoint B, prep time management is inherently collaborative. And what I mean by that is that an individual getting better at prep time management is not likely to be successful unless their partner is also getting better at prep time management, and the two improvements coincide. So a lot of times partners, when they're affirmative or when they're negative, get into kind of tussles over who gets how much prep time and how that process should go about. And that is very damaging to your credibility, and it's damaging to your process. You can't have an effective prep time workflow if the first affirmative and second affirmative are working at cross purposes, or if the first negative and second negative are working at cross purposes. It needs to be a streamlined unit, and the unit needs to be working together to implement a process that was agreed upon before. So all of the prep time stuff that you do needs to be in concert and in connection with your partner. Subpoint C is that every debater should have something to do during each potential prep time slot, and each team should have a plan for overall managing their prep time. So you should never have to decide what to do during a debate. You should already decide before the debate, during this prep time slot, here's what we will be doing. And that frees you up during the debate. You kind of generally know what you're supposed to be doing, and then you can make more specific, high-level decisions. You can spend your prep time doing things instead of thinking about what to do. And obviously there are times to deviate, and in a minute I'm going to talk about how hard and fast rules I disagree with almost universally. Maybe my universal rule is that there should be no universal rules in debate. But the point is that unless you have thought about it in advance and kind of internalized a default setting, forcing yourself to decide how to use prep time during the debate ruins your prep time, because the mere process of deciding how to prep requires prep. And so it is quite self-defeating. I would even suggest that teams explicitly, formally write out their prep time blueprint for both affirmative and negative. And I know that that sounds ridiculous and might look ridiculous, but use legal language, like mirror the terms and services condition of a piece of software like Spotify, or the one I did with you all the other day, Snapchat, and just literally write down your process and then print it out. Or put it on a computer, and then you two can both look at it. And if a disagreement arises, it's like, well, we agreed on this process. It seems like maybe this part of our process is failing. Let's negotiate that, and let's try to make an improvement related to that process. Major principle number 3. The right way to use prep time is the way that maximizes its value. The right way to use prep time is the way that maximizes its value. Subpoint A is that universal prep time rules, as I just suggested, are counterproductive. Every context is slightly different, every debate is slightly different, and different contexts lend themselves to different best practices. There is a lot of inertia in debate. The way that debate works, because you kind of graduate out of debate very quickly. You debate for 4 years maybe, or 3 years even just in high school, and then maybe another 3 years or 4 years in college, but really only for 8 years at the most. Students kind of learn to do things in debate based on what the previous generation did, and then the next generation learns from that generation, and pretty soon something becomes accepted as a norm, just kind of that's the way we do it. But no one is really still thinking about why, or like, is this the way we ought to do it? Is this the best way to do it? And so I think that you should question them. An example that I always use is about baseball. And if someone had gone into cryogenic freeze about 15 years ago, and they were a huge baseball fan, they woke up in 2017 and they looked at the way that infields are shifting, they would be aghast. They would be like, this is ridiculous. Or in the NBA, if someone woke up even from 10 years ago and they watched an NBA game, they're jacking up 1,000,000 threes in every game. What in the world? This is a terrible perversion of the sport that I love. But it turns out that by thinking analytically and thinking critically about practices in baseball and in basketball, really smart people using the scientific method were able to figure out better ways to position their defense in baseball, or better ways to implement an offense in basketball. And there are a lot of opportunities to do that in debate, and I think prep time usage is one of those. Subpoint B is that your primary goal is to maximize the utility of every second of prep time. You want to use your prep time to maximize its value, not just to save it for the end of the debate. Saving it for the end of the debate, of course, is important, because those final speeches require a lot of thinking and a lot of processing and a lot of packaging and planning. And so I'm not saying that you should not care about preserving end-round prep time. But sometimes, in order to save prep time for the end of the debate, students don't use prep time early in the debate and make mistakes that they can't come back from. Or they overlook things that then mean that even if they had 30 minutes of prep time before one of their final rebuttals, they have already lost the debate. This also includes maximizing the utility for you of the other team's prep time. I think many students think of their prep time as the 8 minutes that they are taking, but then there's not much prepping going on when the other team has declared that they're using prep time. And figuring out how to do that better is a huge inefficiency, because if you productively use all 16 minutes or close to it, instead of just your 8, that's a lot. That's a big difference. That's 50% more minutes. Subpoint C, contrary to popular opinion, there are actually 11 potential slots to use prep time in each debate. And because either team could theoretically use prep time in 10 of those slots, there are actually 21 potential prep time opportunities in each debate. So those prep time opportunities should be self-evident after the 1AC but before the 1AC cross-sex, after the 1AC cross-sex but before the 1NC, et cetera, all the way until after the 2NR but before the 2AR. I polled the lab a few days ago and asked for them to establish what the average or median prep time usage is in a typical debate. And I kind of averaged the student submissions, and I didn't even submit one myself. And based on your input, this is how a normal debate or a typical debate, an average debate, plays out in terms of prep time usage. No prep time is used by either side after the 1AC or after the 1AC cross-sex before the 1NC, or after the 1NC before the 1NC cross-sex. A few of you thought maybe 30 seconds are used in there a little bit, but the overwhelming consensus of the lab is no prep time is used until after the 1NC cross-sex, and that's before the 2AC. And the average amount of time that people thought the AF would prep there is 1 minute and 45 seconds about. So no prep time is used until the AF takes some prep time before the 2AC, about 1 minute and 45 seconds, around 2 minutes, something like that. After the 2AC, but before the 2AC cross-sex, the average prep time that you thought the negative took is 30 seconds. So the AF is now used 145, the negative is used 30 seconds. Then before the 2NC, before the negative block, you think that the 2NC typically uses about 3.5 minutes of prep time. So they're up to 4 minutes of prep time use. Before the 2NC cross-sex, then after the 2NC, the first part of the negative block is included, you all think that about 15 seconds of affirmative prep time is typically used. And then no negative prep before the 1NR. And then you think that after the 1NR, before the 1AR, there are 3 minutes of AF prep time used typically. After the 1AR, before the 2NR, 4 minutes of negative prep time. The remaining negative prep time is used. And then that leaves 3 minutes for the affirmative before the 2AR. And I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, there's obviously, it was funny because I said make sure your numbers add up to 8, and I think about 60% of your numbers for the affirmative did not add up to 8. And I think that's a common thing. Everyone thinks the 2AC takes 3 minutes, and the 1AR takes 3 minutes, and the 2AR takes 5 minutes, and that does not add up to 8. So that's the standard. Part 2 of this lecture is my take on specific ways to use those slots in your prep time better. So specific ways to use prep time better. And in this section, I'm going to go slot by slot throughout the debate, and I'm going to talk about how I think that prep time during that slot can be used. I'm going to highlight some opportunities for what I call weird prep time use. And I will, for the purposes of the article, I will assume that you can't take prep time during the speech. Sometimes that comes up. I'm just going to talk about the slots between speeches, and I'm going to give you my take. So the first slot in the debate is after the 1AC, but before the 1AC cross-sex. And so in most debates, that is not a time when any prep time is taken, and that's because the negative will have already done a good job preparing their cross-examination before the debate. The exception is that against a new affirmative, or even just a new advantage or new plan or something like that, this could be a good opportunity for the negative to take some prep time so they can discuss the 1NC and so that they can plan the cross-sex. A lot of times a new affirmative, even a new affirmative kind of advantage or plan change or just kind of restructuring or something like that is intentionally decided and introduced to mess up or complicate the negative's planned strategy. And so if that is what the affirmative has done, they did well, you should take time before the cross-sex to talk it out and say, did this take this counterplan away? Does this avoid the link to the critique that we wanted to go for? We need to work on rewriting our counterplan text to account for the new plan. Let's do that. And once you've had that conversation, then you can start the cross-sex, and the one end can work independently to kind of implement those things and finish putting together the changed 1NC. But most of the time, you're not going to use prep time on either side in that slot. The second slot is after the 1AC's cross-sex, but before the 1NC. And in most debates, again, either side is going to take prep time during this slot. If your 1NC is not ready, I do think the negative should take prep time here. And I don't think that it is a cardinal sin to take prep time before the 1NC, especially when either the schedule was kind of late breaking and you just didn't get things put together in time, or more, hopefully that doesn't happen, and the more likely scenario is that the 1AC has kind of made some slight changes and you've kind of, you need to make an adjustment. And maybe you don't think of the adjustment until something happened in the cross-sex that was like, ooh, that is a red flag, I need to make an adjustment based on that. or it was something new and until you heard it, you had to make an adjustment. It is better to use a bit of prep time before the 1NC and make sure you get that right than to try to save that time until before the 2NR, because this is one of those times when if you mess it up, the 2NR might be hopeless because you've written your counterplan wrong or you've chosen a strategy that doesn't compete or something like that. And be aware of things that happen in the cross-sex. Sometimes things happen in the cross-sex and they kind of clue everyone in to, ooh, that's different than what was expected. Ooh, that's a twist. That was something we didn't see coming. But too many negatives are just like, well, you can't use prep before the 1NC, so we'll just read the 1NC we prepared and we'll hope for the best. We'll adapt to it in the negative block. I don't think that's a very good idea. The third prep time slot is after the 1NC and before the 1NC cross-sex, and I don't think that the AF usually uses prep time here, but I think they should nearly always. If the 2A is going to take some prep time before the 2AC, you might as well just take it on the front end so that you have a little bit of extra time to start that process of preparing, start being very critical and scrutinizing the 1NC's arguments, the text of their counterplan, the text of their interpretation on topicality, any specific link arguments, any new case arguments that you need to think about. And during that time, then the first affirmative can be making their cross-examination better. They should have a good cross-ex blueprint before the debate, but an excellent cross-examination of the 1NC can make a huge difference in the AF's winning percentage. And as long as the 2AC is going to take prep time and you're preparing, that's really a no-cost time to take prep time. It just means that the 2A is doing some 2AC prep before the cross-ex instead of after. And why would you do it after if by doing it before you're giving your partner a chance to do a better cross-ex and you're giving yourself as a second affirmative a chance to prep far enough along the process that you might be able to identify something important that needs to be asked in the cross-ex. If you don't do that until after the cross-examination, you lose both of those benefits. And so I really don't see any reason why this has become the norm. I think it makes absolutely no sense. It's like in basketball shooting a lot of mid-range two-point shots. Like they did it because that's what you did, but it doesn't make any sense mathematically. I mean, as the Golden State Warriors have demonstrated, but just by changing that one thing, you can make a huge difference. Obviously, I don't think that using cross-ex before 1NC CX is like the Golden State Warriors taking over the NBA, but I do think it's a significant benefit at absolutely no cost. Slot number 4 is after the 1NC cross-ex is over, but before the 2AC. This is usually the first time, or typically the first time, the affirmative uses some prep time. I think the affirmative should try to minimize the amount of prep time that they use in this slot, but I don't think they should use no prep time in this slot. I do think they should take a bit of prep time, especially if something happened in the cross-ex, or if they need to have a brief conversation. They should always have a brief conversation. So it's not if, it's you do have to have a brief conversation between the two partners, because you want to have two sets of eyes on any important things. You want to be talking about T violations, counterplan texts, alternatives, any kind of thing that seems like it could possibly be a landmine of any kind, as well as to talk about the roadmap for the 2AC and just kind of make sure that the 1A is there to double check and provide support for the decision about relative importance and roadmap and relative time distribution. And that shouldn't be a super in-depth or lengthy conversation if you have designed and practiced that workflow in advance. A lot of what happens in debates is that the first affirmative will just kind of sit there and the 2A will be like, all right, this is what I'm doing, and the 1A will distractedly be like, oh, okay. Or the 1A will want to take over, and so they'll be like, no, you should totally straight impact turn the cap K or whatever, and that's not part of the blueprint. That's just an unproductive, obnoxious piece of feedback. So you have to work well with your partner, you have to have a process, but having two people think about the kind of potential things, pitfalls that could cost you the debate, as well as thinking about the roadmap and just sort of your strategic understanding of where the debate is likely to go is very helpful, and you should do that all the time. The negative should almost never take prep time before the 2AC, but if the 2AC wants to give a stand-up 2AC, it's not unthinkable that the negative would actually say, hang on, time out, we're going to take a bit of prep time to make sure that the negative is situated for the negative block, because the 2NC sometimes, especially in a debate where something was new or a strategy is kind of being put together at the last minute, the negative might be counting on having a few minutes before the 2AC to get themselves in a position to flow the 2AC and then give the negative block. They might still be putting together their document or finishing highlighting the card. Just get that done before the 2AC so you're not multitasking and you don't miss something. Obviously your goal should be for that to never happen, but there is no rule against taking prep time before your opponent's speech. And so if you need it, take it instead of trying to multitask and then dropping something because you weren't flowing. Slot number 5 is after the 2AC but before the 2AC cross-ex. Again, the neg, I think it is starting to become typical for the neg to have a brief conversation. So the way this usually works is that the speech finishes and then the negative team says, we'll take some prep. And then there's like some loud whispering, and sometimes you can understand, sometimes you won't, and it's like, TA, counterplan, K, yeah, all right, end prep, and then you start the cross-ex immediately. So you're taking 10 seconds of prep time or something like that. I think you should almost always take significantly more, even though that's weird. And to To me, again, it does not make sense to cross-examine the 2AC until you have determined how to split the block and started to prepare for the negative block. Because sometimes it takes a little while to start preparing, and then you realize an interaction, or you start to scrutinize a particular piece of evidence, and then it becomes evident that that is important. In the activity we did the other day, if you had really scrutinized as to the process of preparing the 2AC frontline to the banned private schools counterclaim, you would notice, like, ooh, there's an interaction here that we can really exploit. We should cross-ex about that. I should write out that as an extension for the school choice counterclaim. We should extend that. And so once you do that, your cross-examination is going to be much better, and you're going to be better able to identify the things that it is worth cross-examining about. I think also if the 2NC has already kind of begun some of the 2NC prep time, you don't necessarily have to finish before the cross-ex, but if you've begun it, then the 2N can be a little bit more attuned to the cross-ex. Typically, my suggestion would be for the person not involved in the cross-ex to just completely stay out of it, and I still think that that is true. But the 2N kind of needs to be attuned to what the 2AC is saying about their answers to the negative's arguments, because the 2NC is the captain of the negative ship and ultimately will have to deliver the 2NR. So the more time that you can kind of be a little bit clued in to what the second affirmative is talking about, I think the better for your chances of winning the debate on the negative. If the negative does not take any prep time here, this is another opportunity for the affirmative in some limited spots to take really weird prep time and say, actually, hang on, before the cross-ex, we'll take a moment of prep time. And the reason that you might need to do that is if things are late breaking and there's something new or something happened, and you want to make sure that the both affirmative debaters have a good flow of the debate so far, and that they're on the same page about what the 1AR should be doing, what the first affirmative should be doing during that next chunk of prep time. So you don't want the cross-ex to start and for the first affirmative to just be sitting there, kind of flipping their pen or whatever. You want to make sure that the first affirmative has finished backflowing the 2AC on whatever part the 2AC doesn't have a block for and couldn't easily backflow themselves. And you want to make sure that there's you're on the same page about, all right, maybe it was this new K that you hadn't debated before. The 2AC took some time, they put together their front line, the 1A has flowed it, now the 1A has backflowed for the 2A, and then you sit down and you're like, let's just talk this through, because we hadn't talked about this before, it was a new critique, it was a new, we'd never debated this critique before, we never talked about it before. What are the threads that we're going to want to extend? All right, why don't you spend this prep time working on this permutation argument or this fault argument or this impact argument or whatever. And then say, all right, fine. And just with 15 seconds even, you can put yourself in a position to have a much more successful 3 minutes of affirmative prep time, and it only costs you 15 seconds. I wouldn't do that commonly, but there are many spots where I think that that's helpful. And it really doesn't come at any cost because the negative is not going to be doing any prep time during that period. So it's not like you're giving them any strategic benefit. You're just making sure that you're ready and that you're making use of your time maximally. Number 6 is after the 2AC cross-ex but before the 2NC. The negative almost always takes prep time here, and they should. But the 2N should minimize the amount of time they take here and move more of it on the other side of the cross-ex, in my opinion. And by doing good pre-tournament and pre-round work, you can really limit the amount of prep time you take for the 2NC. Sometimes the negative is just ready right away, and so they only take 30 seconds or even no prep time for the 2NC. And that's another spot where the AF could consider taking some really weird prep time. So if the 2NC is going to give a stand-up 2NC, maybe the affirmative did not take any prep time before the cross-ex, so they're still a little discombobulated. They need to get on the same page. Don't let that 2NC just get up there and give the speech before you and your partner are set and comfortable and on the same page. Stop them. They're doing that on purpose. They're trying to make a connection. They're trying to put pressure on you. They're trying to catch you off guard. A lot of times this will happen in a critique debate where the 2NC doesn't even really respond to the 2AC. They just say the same thing all the time, so why do they need any prep time? Take some prep time. It's not giving them any extra prep time. They were already ready. But it gives you a chance to control the debate, make them stop, settle the room. It totally stops the momentum and the kind of, stand-up 2NC, although I don't think most people will find that impressive. But again, if you're not on the same page, or if you're not backflowed, if you just don't have your stuff together, if the 2A has not directed the 1A about what they should be prepping or what they should be thinking about, then it's an opportunity to use some really weird prep time. Slot number 7 is after the 2NC but before the 2NC cross-ex. The AF almost never takes prep time here, but again, I think they almost always should take prep time here, because this is an opportunity for the second affirmative to be involved in guiding the first affirmative's prep time versus the 2NC. A lot of times, affirmatives wait until after the whole negative block is done to prep for the 1AR, and I don't get that, because you could take prep time after the 2NC and get prepared against that 8 minutes of the negative block. That's more than half of the negative block. Before the cross-examination of the 2NC. So you've gone down the road of preparing against the 2NC's arguments. The 2A is helping and working with you. The 2A is building a more sophisticated cross-examination strategy. They had a good blueprint before the debate, but they're really customizing it. They're coordinating their cross-examination strategy with their affirmative 1AR strategy. Everybody's on the same page about big picture issues, about even specific issues, about particular cards. You can kind of figure out, all right, it seems like if this is our strategy, then the key argument is this, or the key negative card is this. And then the second affirmative can spend that prep time while the 1A is prepping, designing a cross-examination approach that attacks that card or attacks that argument or predicts what's going to happen going forward and kind of does the trial balloon thing where you kind of see if we make this decision, how is that going to play out by the end of the debate? Are we confident that our arguments will defeat their arguments? On the negative, sometimes it's necessary to take prep time here so that the 2N can consult with the partner. Usually it's because the 2N didn't cover something or because the 2N thought of something as they were executing their 2NC and they couldn't stop during the speech, so they thought like, oh, actually, hang on, you can't kick that a certain way, or oh, actually, hang on, I need you to extend a different impact defense argument than I thought, or you can't extend a certain impact defense argument because I just read an add-on module that I didn't tell you about. So if you weren't paying attention, you can't read that. Do that before the cross-ex so that your partner, the 1N, has the whole cross-ex to prepare. A lot of second negatives wait until after the cross-ex, and then why do that? That means that whole 3 minutes, the 1N was blissfully unaware of this change you have made to their next speech. Don't do that to them. That would be, it's both rude and just not very effective. The eighth spot is after the 2NC cross-ex, but before the 1NR. And you shouldn't really ever take prep time here unless something unexpected happened in the cross-ex that requires the negative to coordinate with the 1N again. So sometimes you don't figure it out during your 2NC speech. Sometimes you figure it out during the 2NC cross-ex. The AF kind of gets you on something. Or the AF asks a question that makes you realize, oh, actually, I dropped a condo and they asked about it, so yeah, you got that. Or it's an interaction, or it's something like that. It's like maybe the second affirmative is really pushing hard on, like, you didn't read a card on this. And the second negative's instinct is like, well, I don't have to because you dropped it. You could kind of go to war or whatever, die on that hill, but it would better just be like, yo, I just need you to read one card. And then that takes away that threat. This is another opportunity for the AF to take weird prep time. So if the 1A is not finished prepping the 1AR on the 2NC's arguments, you might as well take time here when the negative has nothing to do than to wait until after the 1NR. It also allows you, and I think this is a really undervalued thing, it allows you as the first affirmative to just kind of finish something so that you don't have so many balls in the air simultaneously. Because if you're flowing and trying to think about the 1NR while you're also still kind of thinking about how you didn't quite finish the 2NC, you can miss things or you can get kind of discombobulated. And so sometimes this doesn't work because the negative designs their block really well such that you can't really prepare for the 2NC until after the 1NR. And so when we talk about road mapping and negative strategy at a future time, I think there's a lot of value in designing negative blocks that kind of prevent the AF and make the AF think about the whole negative block instead of just parts of it. But most negative blocks, I think the first affirmative can reasonably prep against the 2NC and prep against the 1NR relatively independently. And it makes sense to finish the 2NC before the 1NR begins. And I think that by doing that, you are disrupting the negative. The negative does not like it. They're not used to the affirmative taking prep time during that spot. The 2N doesn't really have anything to do. The 1N is already done, so giving them a little extra prep time makes no difference. They already had so much prep time that it is egregious. It's the most prep time any speech has in the debate. And so it gives them very little advantage. But actually, they really don't like it when the 1A after the 1NR takes a relatively small amount of prep time. That disrupts the negative. A lot of times the 2N likes that as their cool down period. Because if you think about it, the second negative has to speak at the kind of in the middle of the debate, at the end of the negative block, and then pretty soon right after that. And a lot of second negatives don't like that. They kind of like, they make their hot debut at the beginning of the debate with the opening cross-sex, and they're feeling good about themselves, and they get to kind of take a break. Then they give this 2NC, and then they only get a really small break before they got to get back on stage. And a lot of them might get the sense that they don't like that. They would like a little longer break. So they really like it when the 1A, before the 1A or directly before the 1AR takes 3 or 4 minutes. That's their cool down period. It's their recombobulation period. It's when they really start thinking about their 2NR. And if you don't do it there, they don't get that chance to think about their 2NR. So I think there's an advantage there that I can't prove it, but I really think that I see it there. Number 9 is after the 1NR and before the 1AR. This is where the AF usually takes a bunch of prep time, prepares for the entire negative block. I've already said why I don't think that makes very much sense. So I don't think we really need to talk about the affirmative strategy. I think obviously you need to prepare your 1AR for the 1NR part here. You can't do it before that because you haven't heard the 1NR yet. This is an opportunity sometimes for the negative to use weird prep time, and that's in a spot where the 1AR announces that they're going to give a stand-up 1AR. And again, that's the move. That's a bold move by the affirmative It doesn't happen as much anymore. That used to be a very common thing. It's not very smart. But the 2N might need a little bit of time to just kind of finish debriefing the 1NR, for the 1N first negative to get their document together, to kind of have something for the 1N to be doing during the 1AR, be watching out for. I need you to read their link cards, or I need you to summarize my link cards, or I need you to summarize these case arguments so I can send those in the 2NR. It's not a good idea to just get caught off guard and to be rushed and to just kind of not be ready to listen to the 1AR. You want to be in a good place. So you wouldn't take a lot, but sometimes the affirmative is going to be trying, just like I just described, kind of trying to catch you off guard and trying to kind of keep you from having your decompression period in your 2NR planning period. Don't let them. Take a moment, take 30 seconds just to get recombobulated. And the 1A is just going to stand there. And so they're not getting any advantage because they said they were ready. Obviously, maybe they would then be like, actually, I wasn't ready, and they'd start prepping, but who cares? Then they're actually taking more prep time for you. But for the most part, they really liked it when they could confidently say, no prep, I'm ready, the order is, the doc sent out, is everybody ready? Actually, no, we're going to take a bit of prep time. And then they just sort of stand there awkwardly. So it doesn't give them a huge advantage. And I think that's what people are worried about. They don't want to give the other team an advantage. I don't think it does. Prep time slot number 10. We're getting toward the end after the 1AR before the 2NR. Obviously, the negative should use the rest of their prep time here. Ideally, you'd have about 4 minutes, but I don't think it's that big of a deal if you have a little bit less, if you've been using your prep time intelligently during the debate, and if you're well prepared before the debate. And you should use that prep time to think about the important stuff, the hard stuff, the decision-making stuff, the framing stuff. It's the time where you decide what to go for, although I think sometimes that's overrated. It's like usually if you design a strategy well, there is something you're going to go for, and what happens in the debate doesn't make that big of a difference. In some debates, you do have two things. Maybe you don't have a good strategy, and so it matters more making that decision. But really, a well-executed 2NR on anything is fine. It's better than a poorly executed 2NR on anything. So obviously, there are exceptions if the differences in argument quality are extreme. But if we're just talking kind of most debates, 90% of debates, it is not nearly as important what you go for as how you go for it, how you frame it, how you design that opening statement, how you frame the ballot, how you anticipate the second affirmative responses, how you preempt them, how you package arguments, how you help the judge decide that your set of arguments is better than their set of arguments. And so don't just sit there and kind of ponder or whatever. Like, have a process and practice that process and critique that process and keep trying to improve. But 4 minutes would be a good total. Obviously, if you had 5, that would be great. But I think sometimes people leave a ton of time for the 2NR, and I'm not even really sure what they're doing during 2NR prep time. But I do know that their cross-examinations would have been much better if they had used a bit more earlier in the debate, and their negative block would have been a lot better if the 2N had used a little bit more prep time before the 2NC. It is very rare, sometimes, and I don't know that I've ever seen a situation where I would really suggest that you do this, the AF might want to take a bit of prep time to sort of ice the kicker, that's a football thing, or just kind of catch them off guard. There's not that much value to that, but there might be value in making sure that you have enough time to get your materials together. So if there was a situation where something had gone a bit haywire, you had started prepping something, but then something got messed up, and it's just very important that the affirmative team has what they need ready before they let the 2NR start. And it might actually be better to spend 30 seconds before the 2NR getting your house in order, your evidence set in order, your process in order, so that you can just sit there and listen carefully to the 2NR, as opposed to letting the 2NR start while you're still kind of moving stuff around. And again, limiting multitasking is a big part of a lot of my thoughts about this, because humans are not good at multitasking. It might be impossible. We can ask Vivek later for his opinion about this as a neuroscience student. But if you're trying to do multiple things at the same time, you're going to not be paying as close attention. You're not going to have the bandwidth available to be thinking critically about their arguments and planning for your next speech, because you're still worried about getting your evidence in order or backflowing or something like that. The last slot after the 2NR before the 2AR, this is very obvious. Obviously, the affirmative should use the rest of their prep time, and it's similar to how the negative uses the rest of their prep time. The negative's not going to have any prep time left, so there's no kind of weird prep time strategy here. But again, the affirmative, it's useful to have a lot of prep time for the 2AR, but if the 2AC makes a crucial mistake, or if the cross-examinations aren't very effective, and so therefore the negative is winning more of their arguments than they should have if they had been cross-examined more effectively, that extra prep time at the end doesn't really help you that much. A lot of times there are lost cause 2ARs where the win probability is down to 10% or 5% or something like that. And sometimes I think you can make a bigger increase in your win probability by reallocating that extra minute from the 2ARs prep slot to a cross-examination prep slot, or to part of the first affirmative rebuttal prep slot earlier in the debate, because those are spots where the variance is much higher. Obviously, having that extra minute is important in the 2AR, but we're talking about scarcity, and we're talking about, we can't have it all. We've got to make hard choices between different options. We can't just do it all and spend 4 minutes before everything. We'd like to, but we can't. So I would encourage you, do remember that preserving prep time for the end is important because those are hard speeches, but putting yourself in a position where those hard speeches can be effective also sometimes requires that you make prep time decisions that prioritize earlier parts in the debate. So if each side was given 8 minutes of prep time, we went through the kind of default or standard allocation of prep time. Here's what a prep time usage distribution that I think is a little bit smarter or a little bit more consistent with how I think things are valuable. Again, you don't use any prep time either side until before the first negative constructive cross-ex. I think the AF uses about a minute of prep time there. Before the 2AC, the AF uses another minute, kind of split 50-50. But I would consider moving most of that, 1:45 before the cross-ex, and then only 15 seconds after the cross-ex, something like that. Before the 2AC cross-ex, the negative takes about a minute of prep time. It could be more, depending on how much the negative is going to take to prep for the 2NC. So if the negative was going to take 3 total minutes to prep for the 2NC, I could be sold on 2 minutes before the cross-ex and 1 minute after the cross-ex. I think that would be a good allocation of resources. After the 2NC and before the 2NC cross-ex, a minute of AF prep. I would be fine if it was even 2 minutes of AF prep, depending on how much total prep time the 1AR expected to take. And then another minute or whatever after the 1NR. So a lot of you think about 1AR prep time collectively. Your number for 1AR prep time in total was 3 minutes. So if that was divided 2 minutes and 1 minute, or 1:30 and 1:30, I think that would be a more appropriate split without adding any time to your total 1AR prep time. And then before the 2NR, the negative's got about 4 minutes left, depending on how much they spent in the 2NC and before the cross-ex. And the affirmative has about 3 minutes left for the 2AR. And obviously that's a little bit less, but I think it's not universal, but in a lot of debates, using that time a bit earlier and trying to gain leverage in cross-ex will make a bigger difference in your win probability than saving it all for the end. The one last thing I'll end on is that in order to use some of these weird techniques, and some of them I don't think are even weird, they're just different, you have to be willing to withstand some critical judge comments. So like I said at the beginning, a lot of students, and the way a lot of debate norms develop, it's just some students started doing something in a certain way, or a certain program started doing something in a certain way, and then others mirrored that, and then it just becomes a norm. It just becomes totally accepted. That's how everyone does it. And so some judges will see what you're doing, and they'll be like, that is wrong. I was taught that you do it this other way, and you look weird, you look strange, this is confusing, and do you not know how to debate? Who taught you how to debate? And you should say, oh yeah, I thought it would be more valuable there. And they're like, no, don't ever do that again. And you just say, okay, thank you. But you still do it because it makes your win probability better. When the first Major League Baseball team started shifting their infields, people would look at them and be like, Tampa Bay Devil Rays, what in the hell is wrong with you? Your shortstop is playing in right field. No, that is wrong. For 150 years of baseball, the shortstop played right there at the shortstop position. And the Tampa Bay Devil Rays said, okay, we'll see how it goes. And now every team in Major League Baseball does that because it works better. Similarly in basketball, when the Houston Rockets started shooting up a ridiculous number of three-pointers, people look at it and be like, what is wrong with you? You're shooting 1 million three-pointers. Don't you know that shooting three-pointers is really hard? You don't make three-pointers, then you lose. Basketball history, what is wrong with you? And the Houston Rockets were like, okay, thank you for your feedback. And then they continued to do it, and now all of the teams in the NBA do it because it is more effective. So you need to be a little bit confident, and you need to be a little bit willing to withstand some mocking. And I think that over time, this stuff changes real quick. So it's already started to change a little bit. I've made a big push on this in the last couple summers. I think Jerry and Rom did this a ton, and people got mad at them and thought they were weird, but I think it turned out okay for them. So I think in retrospect, I'm sure Jerry and Rom could go back to many of those judges and say, we appreciate your comment about how we shouldn't prep before the cross-ex, but we're 2-time NFL champions, and no one else in 108 years has ever done that. So we appreciate your feedback. We know what we're doing. So with that, please think about prep time strategically. Try to make the most of every time, and consider using this in some of your practice debates. I'm going to turn this off. Then we can talk.